going to be speaking about the endocrine system in these videos. It's going to be pretty elementary. If you want all the lowdown on it, the Ninja Nerd Science guy is the person for you. He gets into the nitty gritty. It's all the way down to the cellular level. Totally interesting. Anyway, the endocrine system is nothing short of the miraculous. It is so intricate and it's mind-blowing. Here's the illustration of where your endocrine glands are and what they are. On this slide, I'm just going to speak briefly on the pancreas because insulin resistance and diabetes will come up in other videos of mine. Okay, the pancreas makes insulin, and that makes your blood sugar go down. If it's too low, the pancreas also makes glucagon, which helps to raise your blood sugar. So it wants to keep your body just right. The glucagon gets sent to the liver, and that converts it into glucose. Insulin is the hormone that knocks on your cell door to let the glucose in. If you become insulin resistant, then the sugar, the glucose, has a hard time getting into the cell. That's called insulin resistance. And then your blood sugar goes up because it has nowhere to go. Diabetes, on the other hand, is your body's inability to make enough insulin. Let me clarify that a little bit. Insulin resistance leads to type 2 diabetes, and type 1 diabetes is the type that your body is not making. The thyroid is one of several endocrine glands that works on a feedback system with the hypothalamus, pituitary, and thyroid. And the hypothalamus tells the pituitary to make TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, which messages the thyroid. The thyroid makes T4 and T3, and the T4 gets converted in the liver and muscles into the usable form of T3. I think it drops an iodine molecule, if I'm remembering correctly. And the target tissues are heart, liver, bone, and central nervous system. And the feedback system is when there's enough T4 and T3 into the system, it goes back and messages. They call that a negative feedback system. And then it messages the hypothalamus and the pituitary. And there's a lot to thyroid, and as I say, that science nerd guy has some really good information about that. Your parathyroid glands are lentil size that are situated, sort of embedded within the thyroid gland. They make parathyroid hormone, and this is essential in bone growth, building, keeping it built up and strong. The parathyroid hormone also messages the kidneys to conserve minerals such as calcium and phosphorus, and the intestines are messaged from the kidneys to make vitamin D into a usable form. This helps build your bones. It's also very important with your immune system. Parathyroid problems are fairly easy identifiable if the calcium levels become out of normal range. Again, you could see the hypothalamic-pituitary-gonadal axis works on a feedback loop system for both male and female. And I'll make a very short, brief comment in regard to this. The adrenals make a hormone called DHEA, and this messages the either ovaries or testes to stimulate hormone production. And this is a thing that sometimes this could run high in patients with PCOS, and this could masculinize them, say male pattern baldness or hair on their chinny chin. Again, the HPA axis is another feedback loop system, hypothalamus-pituitary-adrenal. The pituitary makes the hormone ACTH, which messages the adrenal glands to make cortisol. In Cushing's disease, there could be a pituitary tumor that makes too much ACTH, and therefore the adrenals get messaged to make too much cortisol. On the other hand, adrenal Cushing's or Cushing's syndrome, there could be a tumor on the adrenal gland making too much cortisol on its own accord and will message the pituitary to suppress ACTH. If your pituitary is not able to make enough ACTH, that would decrease the making of cortisol, and this would be considered secondary adrenal insufficiency. And if the adrenals are not able to make the cortisol, this would be considered primary adrenal insufficiency, and this could also affect the minerals in your body. Since the pituitary gland is considered the master gland, I would consider the adrenal glands a major circuit board of the body for some of their functions. It regulates minerals, regulates glucose metabolism through cortisol. And again, there's where the DHEA is an androgen stimulant, and it also produces the fight or flight hormones, epinephrine and norepinephrine. It's hard to emphasize enough the importance of a proper amount of cortisol in your body. It helps control the body's use of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Now, fats and carbohydrates, including sugar, is what fuels your body, and the proteins are the building blocks. So nutritionally, hugely important. It helps to suppress inflammation, regulate blood pressure, increase blood sugar, and it can decrease bone formation. How important is that? It also helps regulate your sleep-wake cycle, and it gives you a boost to better handle stress or an emergency situation. Growth hormone plays an essential role for a child to grow into adulthood, but I'm going to mostly address the usefulness for adults. And any endocrinologist that says adults don't need growth hormone ought to be shamed out of their profession. Growth hormone is considered the rest and restore hormone. It's produced at its peak in your deepest sleep, and this is when your body repairs damage. Like repair muscle damage from the day before kind of thing. It messages your liver to make IGF-1. And if anybody thinks they might be low on human growth hormone, IGF-1 is the hormone to have tested. Growth hormone pulsates, so in itself it's not a good testing method, but IGF-1 is much more steady in your system. And growth hormone really gets into your whole metabolic system and how it uses nourishment. For example, it could break down fat to a usable form to fuel your cells. It helps to your muscles to uptake glucose to feed them. And importantly, it also helps to synthesize protein. So this is a hugely important for anybody and everybody, adult included, for their well-being. The pituitary gland is only the size of a pea, but it occupies the most high-end real estate of your body. It's dead center in your head or your brain, and it's cupped in its own little bony nest. The pituitary gland is considered the master gland, and it's like the grand conductor of an orchestra. If the violin section isn't playing in time with the percussion, it's going to make a lot of noise, and that's why it's so important that all of your hormones are functioning together for your own well-being. There's the posterior section of the pituitary, and I'll just mention briefly, it produces the antidiuretic hormone, and this essentially is signaling your kidneys not to pee everything out. It also plays a role in childbirth with oxytocin, producing milk and going into labor. The anterior has a lot to do with your day-to-day bodily functions. And we've gone over a lot of this already, but there's a lot of interaction not mentioned. And much of this works all on a feedback loop system. I do get into prolactinomas, and this is too much prolactin produced by the pituitary, and this can be confused with PCOS, so that's why it did make my list. Here's a chart of glands, hormones, and symptoms. Feel free to pause the video to look it all over, but what I did do is highlight with the blue dots the one symptom of fatigue. And symptoms of deficiency could involve your adrenals, cortisol, aldosterone, and DHEA. For women, low testosterone or low estrogen, and in men, the same, low testosterone or estrogen. The thyroid hormones, growth hormone, ACTH, and vitamin D. The symptoms of excess hormones that could cause fatigue would be from the adrenals and high cortisol. That would be or indicative of Cushing's syndrome. Too high insulin could also cause fatigue. Too high a thyroid. Excess ACTH, that would be indicative of Cushing's syndrome, and high parathyroid and high vitamin D. And that could be from overtaking that as a supplement.